Remember that one time I doubted the 49ers all season and said they weren't a real team? Sure hope that humble pie is vegan. Grossi Posse Packer Nation. Welcome to an episode of Packcast, the podcast where you don't have to be a Packers fan, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tom frickin' Yikes Grossi. And today what we're going to do is predict and break down who I think the 6 playoff teams will be in the NFC as the playoff picture comes a little bit more in focus after last night. And here's what we know. While the Packers technically could still get the number 1 or number 2 seed, it is highly unlikely. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at some of the teams that are in the hunt, kind of predict the rest of their schedule, and then go through each of the 6 teams who are currently in playoff contention and their likelihood that they're actually going to stay there. Now, let's first start off with the teams that are in the hunt in the NFC. And looking at this playoff picture, I have to say that it actually seems that the teams that are in there right now in those top 6 spots are most likely going to stay there, because the teams that are in the hunt, with a combination of poor playing, the difficult schedule, and the other teams just having way more wins than them, it seems like things aren't going to change too much. But starting with the LA Rams. Now, obviously, the Rams are playing this evening against the Ravens. Unless they shock the world, I don't see them winning it. But right now, they are the team that is the closest. They currently hold the number 7 seed at 6-4. And so going through their schedule and where I think they'll end up placing for the end of the year, they have the Ravens tonight, which I think they are going to lose. I believe then they will beat the Cardinals. They'll lose to the Seahawks. I also have them losing against the Cowboys, losing against the 49ers, and then winning against the Cardinals to bring them to a total of 8-8. Now, they could beat the Dallas Cowboys, but taking a look at this, that would only make them 9-7, which I don't think they're going to make the playoffs with that either. So I really don't see the Rams making it into the playoffs this year. So going from Super Bowl to watching it on the couch. Then you have the 5-6 Chicago Bears, who are technically still in this. Yeah, do I even really need to go through this? Sure, because it'll bring me a little bit of joy. So here you go, Bears. I think you'll win against the Lions, which will be your next game, lose against the Cowboys, lose against the Packers, lose against the Chiefs, and then lose against the Vikings, winning one more game this year to go 6-10 after going 12-4 last year. I would laugh harder, but you know, you saw how the Packers played last night. And so I don't see the Bears. I don't think there's a shot that they are going to be making the playoffs. Even if they are able to beat a team like the Cowboys, they still have 3 really tough games at the end of the year with the Packers, Chiefs, and Vikings. I don't see them winning either of those games. Then you have the Philadelphia Eagles, the other team from the NFC East dumpster fire, sitting at 5-6, going against the Dolphins, who I think they will win. The Giants, I think they'll win. The Redskins, I think they'll win. I think they'll lose against the Cowboys, and they'll win against the Giants once again. But that only brings their record up to 9-7, which I don't believe is going to be enough to make the playoffs this year in the NFC. So while I think the Eagles definitely benefit from having one of the easiest schedules down the stretch, I don't think it's going to be enough, and I don't see the Cowboys dropping too many more games, if any, in order for the Eagles to catch up. Now, technically, the Eagles could swap out with the Cowboys if the Eagles defeat the Cowboys, and the Cowboys also drop a couple other games, but I think you're going to be hard-pressed to see that occur, though the Cowboys did look like utter trash yesterday against the Patriots, so there is that. Then you have the Panthers, who are sitting at 5-6, who also have a pretty decent schedule. They got the Redskins, which I think they'll take down with a win. The Falcons, while getting blown out, I think they'll come back and get a win there. They'll lose against the Seahawks, they'll win against the Colts, and then they'll lose against the Saints, and that's being generous with the Colts. And I think they'll finish 8-8 for the season. Again, they're another team that could go 9-7, or they could go 7-9, but Kyle Allen is just way too inconsistent. He's throwing too many interceptions, and while he was good yesterday against the Saints, almost bringing them down and almost coming away with a win, I don't think the Panthers are I don't think they're a complete enough team, relying off Christian McCaffrey a little bit too much, and I don't think they're going to make it. So that brings us to what we have here in the NFC playoff teams here. So starting with your number 6 seed, I have your Minnesota Vikings at 12-4. Because remember, the way that this works is you have one team from each division, right? That's your seeds number 1 through 4, and that's based off of the best record out of those 4 teams. Then after that, it's just the 2 best teams. They could all come from one division, or they could just come from all over the place. But I see the Vikings finishing potentially 12-4, currently sitting at 8-3. I feel like they're going to lose against Seattle. That's going to be a really tough game with Seattle at home. They'll win against the Lions. They'll win against the Chargers. I have them beating the Packers too. Yeah, I know that's sacrilege. I know, but hear me out. It's a tough game in Minneapolis. We haven't won there yet. And listen, I still am very confident in my Packers, but let's throw a little doubt in there, and I think they're going to win against the Bears. So I have them winning out, except for next week, their loss against Seattle. But that would put them at 12-4, and that still, in this scenario, would make them the number 6 seed, and I'll explain why momentarily. Then I got the San Francisco 49ers at the number 5 spot, finishing 12-4 as well. Obviously, they are 10-1 and looked dominant last night, but they have one of the most brutal stretches to go. And I feel that they're going to at least lose a couple games here. First, they got the Ravens next week, which the Ravens have looked unstoppable. I feel like they'll drop to them. The Saints, I went back and forth on if they were going to win this game or not. And it's tough. I really, really don't know. I feel like the Saints, playing at home, while they did get decimated by the Falcons, I'm gonna give the Saints this one, the win, but that could go either way. The Falcons, they will win. They'll beat the Rams, and I have them losing to the Seahawks in the last game of the season. And so with that, I have them going 12-4, and they will be the number 5 seed. So the 5 and 6 seed will be 12-4, just showing kind of the level of competition this year. Then the number 4 spot, you have the winners of the NFC East, and that will be the Dallas Cowboys sitting at 6-5. I have them finishing 11-5 for the season. I feel like they'll beat the Bills, but that could go either way. They'll beat the Bears, they'll beat the Rams, they'll beat the Eagles, and I think they'll beat the Redskins. I could see the Cowboys running the table, but just a less cool version than the Packers did. And they'll finish with an 11-5 record, and they'll be able to host a playoff game, which in this scenario would be against the 49ers. So you guys could have a whole lot of fun with that. But the Cowboys, again, they have a pretty easy schedule finishing up. The Bills could get them some problems. You never know with the Eagles with those divisional games. And who knows, maybe the Bears show up. It's at Soldier Field, and so that might be a tough game. Then number 3, you have the Green Bay mother-loving Packers, also finishing at 12-4. They also had the benefit of having a pretty easy schedule to finish out the year with just one tough game against the Vikings. But I see them winning against the Giants, winning against the Redskins, winning against the Bears, losing to the Vikings, and winning against the Lions, bringing them into 12-4. So that means that the Vikings and Packers would have the same exact record. So why do the Packers win? Well, you can thank the Bears for that, because the Vikings have lost 2 divisional games thus far, once against us and once against the Bears. We have not lost any divisional games thus far. So if the Green Bay Packers win 4 out of their 5 games and still lose to the Vikings, and the Vikings at least drop one other game, then we have the tiebreaker. And so even if we are both at 12-4, we would pick up the win. Now, if we lost to a divisional opponent, and not the Vikings, we would still have the tiebreaker over the Vikings if we beat them. So the Packers just need to win 4 out of their 5 next games, which are pretty easy games. They can still lose to the Vikings, and they still would be at that number 3 spot. And in this scenario, they would host the Vikings in the wild card round. Oh, what fun that would be. So right now, your wild card matchups would be the Vikings versus the Packers, and you would have the Cowboys versus the 49ers, with the 49ers being the away team. Then the number 2 seed, I have the Seattle Seahawks finishing at 14-2. So this is if they run the table as well. They have a little bit of a tougher schedule, but there's two games in particular that could go either way. I see them winning against the Vikings. That's one of the games that could go either way. Beating the Rams, beating the Panthers, beating the Cardinals, and then beating the 49ers. That's the other game that could go either way. So you could swap out potentially the 49ers here, if they're able to pick up another game and they're able to beat the Seahawks, they'll win the division here. But the Seahawks, obviously, great team this year. The defense is very suspect, though, but Russell Wilson's kind of keeping it alive for them. But right now, I have them finishing off at the number 2 seed, so they would have a first-round bye, and they would play, obviously, whoever was the highest seed after that, potentially the Packers. So you could have a Seahawks-Packers divisional game in Seattle, if that wasn't enough to get your PTSD going. And then number 1, I have the New Orleans Saints. While the Saints have not looked great in the stretch, almost losing to the Panthers, obviously losing to the Falcons, I feel like Drew Brees is still going to pick it up, and they have a pretty beneficial schedule to end the season. So they got to go against the Falcons. I feel like they'll pick up the win here. The 49ers game will be the one really, really tough game, and if they lose that, you might have the Seahawks jumping into first place here in the first seed. I feel like they'll win against the Colts, they'll win against the Titans, and they'll win against the Panthers. So the only game that I got circled here is the 49ers, which should be a hell of a game. But the Saints have the tiebreaker over the Seahawks if they finish at the same record, because the Saints defeated the Seahawks earlier this year. And so with that, the Seahawks would have the number 1 seed and could potentially be playing the 49ers, or if the Vikings were able to pull off a win there. So, or potentially even the Cowboys, if the Cowboys won. But yeah, so right now, just to break it down for you, right now I have your number 1 seed being the Saints, your number 2 seed being the Seahawks, number 3 being the Packers, 4 being the Cowboys, number 5 being the 49ers, and number 6 being the Vikings. And again, considering the schedules and the records of these top 6 teams, I really don't see this changing a whole lot. They could change within those 6, but I don't feel like another team is going to come in here unless the Rams completely shock the world and beat the Ravens and beat the Seahawks. I don't see this changing here. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. And Packers fans, hopefully this makes you feel a little bit better that technically with 4 easy games left to go, if we win all 4 of those and the Vikings drop against the Seahawks, we can lose to the Vikings and we still win the division. So that's a big one. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. Who do you see the top 6 teams in the NFC in the playoffs? You can always find me at TomGrossiComedy.com or at TomGrossiComedy on all social media. See down below. Check out podcasts on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play Music, Spotify, and of course YouTube. And a big shout out and thank you all the Patreons over at patreon.com/TomGrossiComedy. But I'm Tom Grossi. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, go Pack, go!